First of all, what we've been doing recently on our podcast is looking at a photograph that you've posted, and that behind the lens photograph this month is the one with you and the Kaiser, Franz Beckenbauer, you giving him the bad finger and saying, "Come and get it if you want it."
Yeah. That was on one of my better nights. One of my better days at Wembley. I only played at Wembley a handful of times, but that was a good one, and if it was worth not having the other good days just to prove a couple of people wrong.
It must have been one of the most magnificent England debuts of all time.
Yeah, it's been rated. A lot of people say, well, it was a friendly and it wasn't a World Cup and not all that, but I don't believe. I think you got. It wasn't that for me. It was bigger than a World Cup match for me because the pressure was on. You know, I've been banned for 3 years by the other manager, Ramsey. I've been out in the cold and never looked like I was gonna. Actually, my love for playing for England had gone. They kind of turned me off. The people at the FA and management turned me off of it, and I was fortunate enough, really, that I had moved to Stoke and rediscovered my form, and through you know who. So I went into that match full of, so full of confidence. It was incredible. You know, I obviously didn't know I was going to play when I turned up at the HQ, on the Sunday morning. But I found out pretty quickly. I played so well on the Saturday against Manchester City. We beat them 4-0, and I had a hand in most of the goals. And I really, if he hadn't, I had a feeling that he was saving me for the West Germans, who were world champions, and because he had an opportunity to pick me a couple of matches before, and I got a feeling that he said to his sidekick Les Cocker that we'll save him for the big one, and then we can get rid of him.
And not just a hand in the goals against Manchester City, that wonderful goal that you scored when you took the throw in, balls nonchalantly come to you with that shoulder and you've took it, you took the throw in, come inside, scored a magnificent goal. And you referenced Ramsey, which is a link to Ipswich, and it was 50 years to the day that you scored your ghost goal against Ipswich down at Stamford Bridge.
Yeah, well, I call it the goal that never. They call it the goal that never was, but it was. Yeah. The old adage that we used to use: read the papers in the morning. But it's I laugh at that. I've always laughed at that goal, and but what intrigues me more than anything is that how our refereeing has not improved since. Because funnily enough, I just got something from Jason Pettigrove started asking the same question. What do you recall about it? And all I recall about it, really, I don't think much about the goal at the time because I think it was laughable. And that's nothing's changed since then, even to the extent of the ridiculous VAR today. They used to make excuses for referees and linesmen and officials that they were amateurs in a professional game, and that was always their get out. But that isn't the case today. They're professional people. They train. They get very well paid, and they shouldn't be making such mistakes. And now they give the referees another excuse now with the VAR to make silly decisions, and the VAR is actually taking the game backwards.
Well, let's go back to 1967 because this is the thread. And we had two great cup finals that year, one involving Queen's Park Rangers being the first third division club to win the League Cup, and in the FA Cup it was Tottenham versus Chelsea affair, wasn't it? Or certainly the semi-final was.
Yeah, no, it was. You're right. 67 was that was a final that nearly never happened. Chelsea and Tottenham, because Chelsea, there was a big dispute over cup final tickets, and there would have that was Chelsea. I mean, I was at the game. I was at the game with my brother, and I was only 15 at that time. I was just signed apprentice, and I was about a year into my apprenticeship, and I didn't find out till later on that the Chelsea players were in a hotel in Bournemouth till about 4 o'clock in the morning on that Saturday morning, the FA Cup final, and they weren't playing. Yeah. And I might have actually made my debut as a 15-year-old, because that's how many players they had. They was been so short of players that me and my brother might have had to play. So they, because they refused to play, because in those days, it always makes me laugh when you see players in them days, after they've got through the semi-final, they're all jumping and singing and dancing and all that. That wasn't so much getting to Wembley. It was because it was a big payday. It was they used to get 100 tickets 100 tickets to buy, and they get them in one hand and they go out to the other hand to either Stan Flashman or whoever else wanted to buy them. So that was a big payday for footballers in them days, and that was why Chelsea held out that morning and they weren't going to play. And then at the 13th hour, they said give them the tickets. So I don't know where they got the tickets from, but that would have been quite some final had they refused to play.
And when I said that, it was a little bit of joviality, because in the semi-final at Villa Park, I believe another game that he was at, Leeds United had 2 goals disallowed, and the second goal by Peter Lorimer for encroachment from a Chelsea player, and then almost after that the whistle blew and Chelsea were at Wembley. But that day at Villa Park was quite bizarre in 1967 as well, wasn't it?
Well, I remember that for 2 reasons. One, I was in line with Peter Lorimer when he smashed that ball in the last kick of the game, and I remember it hitting the net and coming back out. And as it was coming back out, Peter Bonetti started to dive. Yeah, he hit it that hard. I've never seen a ball hit so hard. And it was also a time when they brought in the rule that protecting goalkeepers, and one of my great friends, Johnny Boyle, was playing, and I remember he was running through onto a through ball, and Gary Sprake come out, and as he came through, I remember going in after the round to see after the game, and Johnny Boyle come out with 6 stud marks on the right side of his face, where Gary Sprake had put his boot into his face. So that was the way Leeds handled that kind of stuff. Once again, referees making, or the FA making terrible mistakes. They could have took. I mean, can you imagine that? If he'd have got him in the eye, he could have took his eye out. But that was the way Leeds played the game. But that was the Gary Sprake. So it was quite fitting, really, that when they actually got to the final against us in 1970, that Gary kindly let one under his body for a shot from Peter Houseman that I think my grandmother would have saved.
It was like that, wasn't it, at times, Gary Sprake?
Yeah.
He turned his manager a whiter shade of pale on a few occasions, which leads us to our first record today, Procol Harum's classic and #1, and was #1 on your 16th birthday, by the way. Do you know what Procol Harum means?
No, I don't. I've never. It's one of those things that you've got me out. You've caught me out on it. It's one of those things that I would usually look up.
I've got you back for Madonna.
Yeah.
Far from these things, it means Procol Harum. Procol Harum is Latin for far from these things. So what's the story behind this wonderful song that was a little bit of truth, like all songs would do, a little bit of truth, and a little bit like with the line about the miller telling the tale? That was a figment of imagination, but put together in a concise way that confused everybody. So what's the story behind that track?
Well, I just think it was like most of the songs that we pick out, or I pick out. It's It was a sign of the times. It was just so different from any other songs that were made. I mean, that was a time of you know, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, the Searchers, and you know, the Hollies, whoever. Then Graham Nash went, the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. So this was one right out the blue, wasn't it?
Yeah.
This was one pull right out the top drawer, and it was as classy a song as ever been made. And I think that, you know, when I look through the music of those days, it's got to be one of the greatest songs recorded. Uh, you know, Skip a Life and Dangle, and you know, it's a kind of song I think I might have written, you know, but I just, as we spoke about before, just didn't have the ability to put the music to it.
And I'm guessing that you and the rest of your Chelsea boys wouldn't have minded being in that place that the songwriter was writing about for the whiter shade of pale. It looked quite a bit of a party that was going on, with ceilings being removed and everything else. And I think quite a bit of alcohol was taken, and probably other things as well.
Well, they might have got a game in our team then, mightn't they? Our Chelsea team there. Yeah, I mean, those were the days. Those were the days when that was all happening at that
Yeah.
time. I remember the Elton John. I've read the Elton John book a couple of times, and some of the stories in there, what they were getting up to, and the John Lennon days, and that, you know, everything went in those days. It was a fantastic days of. I'm not saying that I'm one for drugs and all that, but you know, marijuana never really killed anybody. In fact, it's quite the opposite. But no, it was. I mean, without the drugs, there wouldn't have been songs like that, would there? You know, there would have been. You know, I played a song the other day, "A Day in the Life" by the Beatles, and it's a fantastic song. But the LSD, "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds" and stuff like that. You know, it's all about smoking weed or whatever. There's nothing right in today's society. I mean, that is nothing today
Mm.
with what goes on. In fact, it's quite the opposite.
But in those days, Al, you're right. I mean, we've come off the back of pretty much really the Second World War, haven't we? And then the 50s. We've entered that new decade of the 60s. And by the time 66, 67, and England obviously won the World Cup and all the rest of it, it was the swinging 60s. And the epicenter, I'm guessing, was the King's Road and Chelsea.
Well, I think it's funny you should mention England winning the World Cup,
Mm.
because in those days in the King's Road, I don't think anybody realised they did. There
Right.
was so much going on.
Yeah.
It was an incredible time, just an incredible. I remember going down there, just walking down there on a lovely summer's evening, about 5:30, 6 o'clock, and you know, you'd see him come along ringing the bells, Harry Krishna and all this, and then they had you know, all the riots and mods and the rockers and all this, you know. Not that I was one for that, but you know, we'll go into another song in a minute called San Francisco. It's you know, the Flower Power.
Yeah.
It was they were the most incredible. It was like I've watched a couple of movies recently about a kid with a fairy tale book, and he lives his life like a fairy tale, and that's what it was in them days. It was like a fairy tale. You couldn't believe what was going on around you, and as a young 15, 6 year old, you know, I suppose, you know, although I became a footballer, I would just love to have been in their world. And if I would have been born a musician instead, I mean, I would have, you know, plus the fact you've got your sell by date, you know. I mean, when you look at the Rolling Stones today and they're still doing concerts, he's 145, Mick Jagger, and he's still doing concerts. So, you know, it was the music is, you know, that we've said in all our shows, it's just without music there would be no movies, there'd be nothing, would there be no life?
And also, without football, there wouldn't be, because we've always maintained this: music and football go hand in glove, and that's very evident in your autobiography, The Working Man's Ballet. Alan Hudson, confusing Chelsea fans since 1974. Is that a correct statement?
Um, well, the working man's. I mean, the working man ballets are just a incredible title, isn't
Yeah.
it? It's. I think that's what I remember when Jeff Powell, my friend on the Daily Mail, he's a top writer and one of the top in the world. it's just a fantastic writer. And when he saw the title, he was blown away by it, and that was what my manager called it, and that's the way he saw it. And Tony wasn't like me. I mean, I could, I wanted to be, one of these, people. I'm just a great music lover, but Tony did love his music, but he was on a different age, and that's how we see the game played. He sees the game played. It's like it's Swan Lake. He sees Swan Lake as a football match. He used to sit and watch football and think and put music to it. It was just and that was. And the photograph I have of me and George Best, if you put that to music, it's clashing for the ball to music, it just about sums the title up.
We're going to go back to Confusion in a moment, but when you went to America and played for Seattle Sounders, you must have visited San Francisco, and that Scott McKenzie song that does remind you of the Hare Krishnas and the Flower Power. What was it like when you actually went to San Francisco, and through that song of Scott McKenzie's, did you have an idea of what San Francisco was going to be, and did it differ from when you actually landed there?
To tell the truth, I was unfortunate in that we never really spent too much time. That we used, it was like a blur. It was, it was not like going on holiday. You go into these places and play. Like New York, I just adored New York, and could, it was one place I'd love to live. And you go there and you just be blown away by at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning the piano bars, and you picture Billy Joel walking in and playing the piano, or if Elton could, him being a concert pianist as well. These American bars are just leave England light years behind. But I've been over the bridge there and been in San Francisco, but I've never really it's like New Orleans. I'd love to spend time in New Orleans. I've never really been fortunate. They never had a football team at that time, so I never got there. But no, I mean, the United States of America, these cities, and they're like towns, aren't they? And it's the music, New Orleans, and everything else. You can just imagine it's a little bit different going to Fulham or Putney or something like that, or to Stoke-on-Trent in New Orleans. It just brings a new meaning to music.
The confusion comes from confusing Chelsea fans, because lots of Chelsea fans have always believed that you're a Chelsea boy, and when they hear you or see you on the TV or the radio, and why ain't he talking up Chelsea? Why ain't he? Oh, he's a Chelsea. No, Alan Hudson has never been a Chelsea fan. In fact, Stamford Bridge is probably one of the very few football grounds that you haven't paid to get into to watch the players at any time of your career. The first team that you did go to, because your dad was a mad Fulham fan. You were living in Chelsea, but it was Fulham, wasn't he? And then you even, you didn't know this, because while you were, or I was going away to Stratford last Saturday, I was on your Twitter account and I put up the picture of Stan Bowles and you, and I put Stan and a QPR fan, and that really threw and confused the Fulham supporters as well. So let's have a little bit of light on the confusion.
Well, I'm a great believer. I fall out with people, and I really don't understand. I was brought up in a time when people would go to, my elders would go to Chelsea, Stamford Bridge one week and go to Craven Cottage the next, and all the talk in the cafes on Monday when I was only tiny, would be of them, both the local teams, and that's the way I was brought up. And I became a Fulham supporter because my father was born in Fulham, and he didn't for a minute ever encourage me to be he just said, go and enjoy what you want to enjoy. And that's why I say to parents, why do you brainwash your kids into being a supporter? Leave them alone. Let them make their own choice up of anything in life, and let them go where they want. And I ended up, me and my little friend, as luck would have it, little Billy Boyce was the best cricketer and the best sprinter, and I was the best footballer and the best long distance runner. And he was a Jamaican, and I loved my cricket, and I used to say to him, we're very fortunate, Bill, that we don't have to buy a scarf. And he would say, well, why is that? I said, well, we're black and white, aren't we? I said, we don't need a scar. And he would laugh. You know, he said, you're crackers, you know. But that's the way we were. We were the only black and white people in the ground, you know, two friends. And that's why I don't understand this racial thing, and I never will. I'll never get to the bottom of it. But I kind of fell in love with Fulham. I love the side of Fulham. I suppose that's why I became a player, because they had so many bad players. I thought, well, if I can't make it in this game, I can't make it anywhere, because they were hopeless, you know. And what I loved about Fulham and our the supporters of that time, we never expected to win a game. So, you know, there was never any pressure. There was never, unlike today. I'm sat with two Chelsea supporters last night screaming at the television, 3-0 down, and I just can't understand how to get so excited. Because I think the game's all about, it's for fun, all right. You'd want your team to win, but it's not the be all and end all, is it? Let's be fair about it. You know, it's an end. People tend to forget football's an entertainment, and you go to be entertained. And I think that's why I ended up in 1967 watching Queen's Park Rangers go through that fantastic cup run. I see every game right up to Wembley, because I was following Fulham when Rodney Marsh was playing, and I loved him as a player at that time. And then he moved to Queen's Park Rangers, and I followed him more than I did QPR. Yep. But I just loved Loftus Road and the way and the great team they had. They'd have had a couple of Fulham players. They had a fellow called Jim Langley. They also had the great fellow up front, one of the Allens, you know,
Les Allen.
Les Allen.
Yeah.
It's tremendous. He was in the, I think, Tottenham double winning team.
Yeah, he was.
Fantastic old player. They had Bobby Keach. I knew Bobby from a kid, who was at Fulham. So they pulled off the miracle in 1967. I was even up in Birmingham for the semi-final when they beat Birmingham 4-1, I think, in the second leg. Yeah, and I travelled up with my dad on the you know, the supporters bus. So I was very much into that. And even when I missed Wembley 67, I was there for the Chelsea final, but I weren't there for the League Cup final, because I had to be at Stamford Bridge, because that was our job as apprentices. We had to be at the home match. But I can remember staying outside the offices, and I heard that they were 2-0 down, and I listened to, you know, the final few minutes when they scored the winner outside the main office at Chelsea, and everybody thought I was happy because Chelsea had scored or something, but it wasn't. That day was fantastic, you know. But I would love to have been there on that day, especially being 2-0 down and coming back to beat West Brom.
And this is the thing with true football fans, you know, you might get bought up. I mean, I was bought up Birmingham City, but I don't class myself as a fan now. I like to watch football. I like to watch players. I go to games to watch players now, not to watch a football club. Understand that. Sadly, lots of them aren't geniuses. A player that was genius and was your ultimate hero, I'd guess, Johnny Haynes. And there's a lovely story. Petula Clark leads us up to our next record, Don't Sleep in the Subway. I'm guessing Johnny didn't, but there is a Johnny Haynes reference to the song, isn't there?
Well, she was one of my favourite singers of all time, and she used to live just off the King's Road, only about probably 200 yards from where I am now. And I know my mother gave me this information. She used to work in a little bistro in the King's Road when she could get out the house, and yeah, Johnny Haynes used to date Petula Clark, which was very, very hush. I can imagine it today. You know, it would be all over the place today. You know, it would be probably the biggest news in the country. You know, Petula Clark. I mean, I've seen her work with Frank Sinatra and seen her on stage with, you know, with clips of her and Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin. And John, the first £100 a week player in the history of the game, was he was top man, and I got to know him pretty well. And sadly, after my car accident, he had his car accident, but he never got through his. He sadly died, and it was tragic because I was just getting to know John very well, and he come down for one of my functions from Edinburgh, put himself out to come down, and then I sent him a book that I wrote where Fulham going to find the next Johnny Haynes? And he said, you can't publish that because Chelsea fans shoot you. You know, you can't write that because he was such a modest man. But a great man who today would be. I don't think he would play in England today, John. It probably epitomised that. You know, pretty much like Jack. You know, he played for a team who were just, he was on a different planet from them. And I suppose people in Southampton say like Matt Letizia was like that, you know, a big fish in a small bowl. But Johnny was just in love with the football club, and the same as Jack is with his club. So, you know, we've got a like for like there.
And also Tosh Chamberlain as well, because apparently the only reason Johnny signed because his best mate Tosh Chamberlain was playing for Fulham at the time.
Well, they had this wonderful friendship, and that was the one. That was where the joke came from, wasn't it? That was where it all started with Johnny Haynes and Tosh Chamberlain when he went in and got his £100 a week, and it was all over the press and all that, and Tosh went in to see him, and Johnny Haynes said, "No, I wouldn't go in, Tosh." He said, "Hey, you ain't going to get nowhere near like that. You know, you just stick as you are." And he went in, and he says, and I think it was Tommy Trinder who was in charge, and he said, you know, he says he's getting £100 a week, and he says, well, he's getting £100 a week in the summer, and he's getting £70 a week in the winter. He said, which is out of season. And he said, I'm getting £30 a week and £15 a week out of season. And he said, well, you're not as good as Johnny Haynes, are you? He said, oh, well, I am out of season. And that was where that joke came from. So they kind of boosted that joke and put it into a different category. But that's where it come from. Tosh went in claiming more money, but you know, he just, you know, I don't know what Tosh would have done without Johnny Haynes, because Johnny Haynes used to put a ball with the laces just the right way for him, you know.
He was one of, well, probably arguably the best passer of ball that England have ever seen, wasn't he, Johnny Haynes, the maestro?
He was even more than that, Paul. He was even more. I remember the game when they beat Scotland 9-3 when they ripped them apart, and Johnny was a midfield player. I think Johnny scored 2 or 3 and made 3 or 4 or whatever. He was just an outstanding, you know, in a team of Jimmy Greaves, and you know they were probably the 2 best players that London could boast at that time.
And good mates as well. And you're right, I think Johnny did go and live up there in Scotland, and Jimmy gave him a bit of grief, didn't he? Because there was always the needle between England and Scotland. I don't think Greavesy would have gone and lived up there in Jockland, would he? He always used to put the boot in, didn't he, to the old Jockos, especially when he was with Ian St John on that brilliant Saint and Greavesy show.
Well, I remember seeing a thing on television. He was in the back of a black cab, Jimmy Greaves, and the Scottish lad was driving the cab, and he was on the phone to his mate saying, "I got Jimmy Greaves in the back. We love Jimmy Greaves, you know what a player he was." And Jimmy said, "Don't give me all that." He said, "I've been at Hampden Park and I've seen you lot at Wembley. You don't love me. You don't love any of us, you know." So there was great banter between us all in them days, and it continued, didn't it? You know, but that was what was fantastic about the game in those days, because, you know, without the Scottish, our league wouldn't exist.
Yeah,
we had, you know, the best managers, and all the best managers were Scottish, and the best players were Scottish. So and the only one that didn't come down when he should have come down, because Rangers and Celtic were so big at that time, was Jim Baxter. If Jim Baxter would have come down when he was 21, 22, we would have seen another genius, you know.
Sadly, he come down towards the end of his career, and he come down to Sunderland and then Nottingham Forest, and he wasn't in the best of, well, probably conditions and form, was he?
I see him
behind him.
I'd see him play at Fulham for Nottingham Forest, and it was a sad sight.
Yeah.
It was a sad sight, and it's something that always stuck in my mind when I went back to Stoke. And although I got them out, I helped get them out of trouble, the relegation. But I was always aware that you know, when to hang my boots up, because you don't want to be remembered. And I can remember going to the Queen's Park Rangers when I nearly signed for them when I left Chelsea, and I was at the game.
To listen to the rest of this podcast, please go to www.patreon.com/SRB Media, or just follow the links in the description. Thank you.